Thank you all for being here today as we come together to celebrate the achievements of our seniors and to discuss admissions trends from this past application cycle. My name is Peter Davos, and I'm the founder and CEO of Hale Education Group. I stand here before you today having been transformed by my academic experiences that have spanned 2 continents and more than half a dozen universities. As a second-generation hyphenated American, the son of Greek immigrants, neither of whom had the opportunity to study in university, I am a living testament to the power of potential and the life-changing effects of education. If you dream big enough, work hard enough, and have the support of the right people in your life, you too can achieve your dreams. I was privileged enough to attend some of the world's leading universities, including Johns Hopkins, the London School of Economics, Oxford, and Harvard. At Harvard, I graduated top of my class as class marshal, and have since served as a senior marshal at 3 separate commencement ceremonies. As a member of both the Johns Hopkins and Harvard GSD alumni councils, I served a critical role with fellow distinguished alumni to help shape university policy. My educational experiences have defined the person I am today, and now I get to help define the journeys of the students we work with every single day. Almost 12 years ago, I founded the first educational consultancy in the GCC focused exclusively on U.S. university admissions. My vision was built on ethics, transparency, and helping students find the right fit. At the time, and still to this present day, the higher education advisory landscape is dominated by agencies, some of which disingenuously present themselves as independent consultancies. The essence of their business model is to send students to universities that pay them placement fees or commissions. They're incentivized to send their students to the universities that pay them the most. Leading universities in the US, Canada, and Europe do not engage in such practices. Neither do we, and neither will we. Furthermore, when I founded Hale, I did not want to make promises that I could not keep, fabricate false personal narratives, or reverse engineer student success based on an esoteric formula that only I had access to. While other consultancies boast of their student successes through nebulous claims that cannot be verified, Hale has built a reputation based on transparency and consistent local student success for over a decade, year in and year out. There has never been a black box, secret strategy, or insider information that will grant admission to a student. The secret to success lies in developing an authentic, personal narrative based on academic interests and passions, presenting it in a compelling way, and going above and beyond inside and outside the classroom, something we help students do amazingly well at Hale. I am proud to celebrate another year of student success after an application cycle the New York Times described as peak college admissions insanity. Thanks to the wonderful Hale team, which has doubled in the last 18 months, we were able to deliver on another set of stellar acceptances to our students. For the 3rd year in a row, we had 2 undergraduate acceptances to Stanford University, the most selective university in America. Those students will be joining us on stage today. For 11 years in a row, Hale students have secured at least 1 undergraduate acceptance to Stanford. Last year, 2 of the 40 international students accepted to Caltech were Hale students, and the only undergraduate acceptance to MIT was also a Hale student. Our students have been accepted to all 8 Ivy League universities and the most competitive universities in the world. We are also very proud of our Hale Scholars Pro Bono initiative, which has sent deserving students to Harvard, Dartmouth, Chicago, Columbia, NYU, and Brown on full cost of attendance financial aid scholarships. One of our Hale scholars, Mohammed, from Syria, will be joining us as a panelist today. No other educational consultancy or agency dependent on referral and placement fees claiming to be an educational consultancy can match our track record of success. With an average of over 6 university acceptances per student, $9 million awarded in scholarships this year alone, and annual acceptances to the Ivy League and most selective universities in the world, the one constant in every application season is Hale students continue to deliver year in and year out. We are a homegrown company, not backed by private equity, that has always placed the needs of our students and their families first. We have not only grown our team, but we have expanded our offerings. Hale now has dedicated counselors for the UK, Europe, and Canada, allowing for students to benefit from the same level of application support that they have for the US. We have invested in securing the most compelling SAT curriculum and digitally adaptive SAT exams that no one else in the region has access to. Just this year, we had 3 students score perfect 36s in the ACT, 2 of them in their second year of GCSEs. We continue to go from strength to strength, leading the pack, always setting the gold standard in university admissions regionally. Before we welcome the students on stage, I'd like to welcome some of my colleagues and all-star counselors to share a brief set of observations, insights, and experiences from this last admission cycle. I'm so proud of all the wonderful work they've done in unleashing the potential and transforming the lives of their students. Please join me in welcoming my colleagues on stage, Ukasha, Aisha, Bilal, Shafiq, Sam, and Hishan. Thank you. How's it going? Good. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So I'm going to ask just a few questions to shed some light on what peak university admissions insanity looks like. This was the most difficult application cycle in decades. And I think it would be great if, Ukasha, we started with you. What were some of your key observations and takeaways from this past cycle?
Thank you for that question, Peter. I think that's a great way to start the conversation. Welcome to everyone who's here. Thank you guys so much for coming. So there were a few major themes for me this year. I think perhaps the most notable being the increase in applications this year. There was a 7% increase in applications across the board. On Common App, in whole numbers, this translates to an extra 500,000 applications. What I found particularly interesting was that, in the hyper-competitive universities, such as the Ivies, there was a stabilization of the application rates. For some, there was even a dip. For example, for Harvard, there was a 5% dip in applications. And then there's the highly selective universities, but perhaps not as selective universities. Let's take, for example, New York University, or NYU. It received 120,000 applications this year. This is a 13% increase from the year prior, a 50% increase over the last 4 years. And it experienced a halving of the acceptance rate from 16% to 8%, which for me as a counselor who's managing students, these are striking numbers. And we saw this with other universities as well. Let's take, for example, USC, or University of Southern California. It experienced an increase in applications from 60,000 to 80,000, another halving of the acceptance rates from 16% to approximately 9%. We can see this reflected in other universities as well. For example, Boston University or Northeastern University. Applications have gone up by 50% as well over the last 4 years. And their acceptance rates have dwindled all the way down to a mere 7%. Statistically, technically, this makes these universities harder to get into compared to some Ivies. So that was striking for me. And secondly, the recent Supreme Court decision, for those of you who are unaware, this meant removing, or the Supreme Court decision was to remove race as a contributing factor in making an admissions decision on acceptance or rejection. Initially, this was celebrated by international students as they thought this would lead to greater representation for them. But admissions officers had other ideas in the way that they wanted to execute this policy. So what they did was they used this policy to benefit perhaps underprivileged students a bit more relative to the international students who comprise most of the privileged students that attend U.S. universities. So, and in line with this also, there was a change in the makeup of, the way that applications are structured. Supplemental essays changed their form in order to assess better students' abilities to overcome adversity or personal challenges. So, and this is why we also saw a really big increase in deferrals from early to regular, because admissions officers were reserving the early cycle for the absolute most competitive students and perhaps the most deserving ones. So there was a lot of changes across this past year, longer odds, more difficult circumstances for international students. but Hale students pulled through, and you guys will hear from them shortly.
Amazing. Thank you for your insights, Kasha. Aisha, what crucial advice would you give to students who are applying to top U.S. universities today?
Thank you, Peter. So I believe the first and foremost, students have to look at finding the right fit, right? How do you do that? So you visualize your 4 years over in college. You visualize that over a 4-year process. You begin by scouring the necessary websites, whether it's Big Future or Niche, to better understand campus culture. You can check out U.S. News and World Report for recent rankings, if that's something that's really important to you. Visit the college websites and then revisit them to become familiar with the curriculum and see what the academic department has to offer you. You can take a virtual tour to get your bearings. You can research financial aid, clubs and organizations, study abroad programs, and what kind of recruitment opportunities you will have once you graduate. That's something that's really important as well. Only once you gain the valuable insight of which colleges you best align with your interests and values and ideals, will you be able to convey that effectively, both verbally and in written form. Another important piece of advice, of course, is to aim for quality over quantity when it comes to your extracurricular involvement. You don't have to join every single club that's offered in your high school. If you're not athletic, you don't have to join a sports team. If you're not creative, you don't have to pick up an instrument or a paintbrush. Hone your interests, target your passions towards creating a compelling narrative that's personal to you. Quality, I think, involvements are much more impressive than having a long list of superficial involvements. And finally, I think invest in your summers, make the most of them. They offer a rare opportunity for students to dedicate a significant chunk of time to a specific activity, whether it's a specialized biomedical research course or doing a shadowship with a doctor if medicine is your field of interest, or, the initiation or completion of an impactful passion project. Whichever the case, I think in sum, just invest your time wisely and make informed decisions. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Hishan, you were raised in Dubai, and you were even featured as an Ivy Insider panelist in 2019. What unique challenges do you think Dubai students face in this process?
That's a great question. Thank you, Peter. I think it's important I start off by providing some background as to my history in Dubai and my student profile. So as Peter mentioned, I've lived here my whole life. I went to Dubai College, which is a British curriculum school where I studied GCSEs and A-levels. And I was a very business-oriented individual, fascinated by the worlds of entrepreneurship, finance, innovation. I loved to play basketball, competing both inside, outside of school, for academies like MPAC. But much more than that, I think after GCSEs, I realized that I wanted to apply to the States. I went to a very UK-driven school, and I was a bit late in the process. And now in hindsight, I joined much later than I should have. But my school is very much driven on sending, 85, 90% of the student body to top UK institutions. And I felt that I aligned much better towards the US college experience. So the first challenge that I came across is something that I think a lot of Dubai students face, which is a knowledge gap of elite US institutions. I think the biggest disparity is there's this huge discrepancy on what is required and what is expected of students looking at these top US schools. For instance, I can take A-levels, as that was my personal insight. If you are allowed to take 3 A-levels and then apply to university, that isn't necessarily what you should be doing, right? The most competitive applicants are looking at 4 A-levels plus an EPQ, which is weighted at another half of an A-level. There's also the whole process of selecting the right university. We at Hale encounter Dubai students and parents every day that really start and end the conversation simply only talking about Ivy Leagues. And obviously, yes, they are elite US institutions, but there are other top schools that may be safeties or targets that rank top in the country that may be a much better fit for the student and their profile. So this leads me into the last point about the knowledge gap, which is a strict over-reliance on rankings. As Aisha mentioned, it's not all about looking at, what has the top global ranking or what has the top academic reputation. There are so many more factors to consider. Right? It's about doing your due diligence, doing your college research. It was only after, months of delving into Cornell that I realized that it was the right fit for me. I studied the FISC guide, I went on a campus tour, I registered for information sessions. I eventually came to the conclusion that that would be my home for the next 4 years. But it's a process, right? So the Hale experience, is an active process of discovering yourself, your life, your likes, your dislikes, environmental preferences, your aptitude for certain subjects. Ultimately, it's a process that takes time and a lot of effort, which is why we encourage students to start the process sooner rather than later. And that draws me to my second point, which I feel like a lot of Dubai students can relate to, and that's differentiation, right? The last thing we want to do is fall into that pothole of a Dubai kid cliche that spends half their essays discussing their multicultural background because they're in a city surrounded by expats, because quite frankly, all of us here today can say the exact same thing. It's not really differentiating you. So it's about cultivating a unique narrative, a unique story that highlights your personal growth, your character development, and shows these admissions councils that you're ready for the trials and tribulations of higher education.
Thank you for sharing your personal insight and experiences. Bilal, you were lucky. You studied both in Europe and in the US. There seem to be an increasing number of high school students drawn to Europe for their undergraduate study. What is causing some of these trends?
Thank you, Peter. That's a really great question. We have definitely noticed that more and more students are becoming interested in studying in Europe or a combination of Europe and the US. There are a lot of reasons for this, but I've noticed 3 main reasons. The first one being affordability and being closer to home. If you're a business student or a student interested in business, you're going to be paying less than half the cost at IE Madrid, for example, which is a leading business school in Europe, in comparison to Wharton or BU's Questrom School of Business. So these are also really great options. The second main reason is cultural exposure in Europe. You get exposed to a lot of different cultures, languages, traditions, again, at a very young age. And no matter really where you live in Europe, you're always going to be very kind of close by to different European cities. And recently they've even established a direct train from Amsterdam to London in less than 4 hours. So you don't even have to get on a flight. You can just go places. And that's something that's a really great experience at that age. So if you look at someone who's living in Amsterdam, for example, you can get to Paris in 2.5 hours, Brussels in 1.5 hours, London in 4 hours. So that's definitely a factor. The final reason is duration of studies. Undergraduate programs in Europe typically run about 3 years. So that's a great option for students. For example, if you're interested in business, Bocconi offers one of the best business programs in Europe, and that's a 3-year program. If you're interested in hospitality, for example, you can go to EHL in Lausanne, Switzerland, also 3 years. So really great options, especially again for students that are not ready to make that plunge to the US just yet. A combination of Europe for undergraduate and a master's program in the US could be very beneficial. I personally benefited a lot from this combination as I studied in Europe for bachelor's, and then I went to NYU, my dream school, for my master's. And something that a lot of people don't realize is the amount of scholarships available for master's applicants from Europe or applying from Europe. I was able to get about $300,000 in scholarships, which is not a number that I would have thought I would have been able to achieve. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities.
Does the undergraduate approach to education in mainland Europe differ from that in the UK or the US, Canada?
Definitely. That's also a really great question. There is a big difference in terms of curriculum flexibility, for sure. If you look at the US, most undergrad programs are liberal arts colleges that allow you to really pick and choose your major. You can even apply undecided for the most part if you really don't know what to study. However, in Europe, they do require students to pick their major from the beginning and follow a mostly strict structure in terms of studies. The combination of unlikely majors is not really that possible generally. If you are to study 2 different majors, they're usually more closely related, such as business and economics, for example. There are, however, some Dutch universities for the last 30 years that have been implementing a really great format of residential liberal arts colleges in the Netherlands. And the reason these are really great is because it gives students the opportunity to experience a more American-style education in a more traditional residential college environment in Europe. So that's also one of the benefits. One of our students, shout out to Shreya, was accepted to one of these programs, so definitely really proud of her. And this is when counseling definitely comes in hand, because these programs can be quite selective. So the top 3 in the Netherlands, for example, Utrecht, Amsterdam, and Leiden University, their liberal arts colleges only accept 200 students a year, half of which are reserved for Dutch students. So half Dutch, half international. So you really only have about 100 seats available to international students. But again, it's a really great opportunity to experience a liberal arts curriculum in Europe.
Amazing. Moving further north, what does it take to prepare for a top UK university, Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. So the foundation for a strong application at a top UK university is academics. There's really very little flexibility in terms of entry requirements for grades and subjects studied at high school. So say, for example, if a student wants to apply for economics at Oxford, the minimum requirement will be that they're expected to achieve an A star and 2 A's in their A levels with further maths. Or if they're on the American curriculum, 5s in their APs with AP Calculus. Or for IB, an overall score of around 40 with 766 in their HLs, including Math AA HL. And this is the same for the majority of subjects in the UK. So if a student wants to apply for medicine, they have to have studied biology and chemistry. If they want to apply for computer science, they have to have studied maths and physics. But course selection and grades, they really only form the base of a strong application. So on top of that, students have to build a narrative around their subject that demonstrates how they've explored it beyond the classroom. And the main way to do this is through extracurricular activities. But in contrast to the US, these have to be subject specific. So say, for instance, a student applying for medicine, they should undertake an internship at a healthcare facility, or an architecture student should attend a design program, or an economics student should conduct a research project. And this is especially important for the top universities like Oxford or Cambridge, Imperial, LSE, where applicants will be quizzed on their subject knowledge in interviews and entrance exams. And just as a final point with entrance exams, the UK doesn't have a general standardized test, but students for certain subjects do have to sit entrance exams. So for law students, they have to do the LNAT. For medicine, they have to do the UCAT, and they're expected to score between, say, 650 and 700 in that exam. And then when it comes to Oxford and Cambridge, they have entrance exams for every subject. And it's important to note that for all of these entrance exams, students can only sit them once. So preparation is vital for that. But ultimately, a strong application for the UK is all about academics.
Amazing. And is the application process changing?
Yeah, so for the last 30 years, the UK application has pretty much stayed the same. Its main component has been a personal statement of approximately 600 words, which gives students the opportunity to demonstrate their academic journey or explain their extracurricular activities, their goals, to demonstrate critical thinking abilities. And this form of the personal statement offers students a lot of freedom to craft their narrative around their strengths. It has no specific prompt. There's just a collection of questions they're offered, which they can consider when writing, but none of those questions are actually necessary to answer. However, this is going to change in the next couple of years. So while there hasn't been a specific date set for this change, there have been a series of consultations, out of which it's been confirmed that the current personal statement will be replaced with shorter questions that look at topics such as motivation to study a degree, the the academic preparation for a course, and the preparation through other activities. So these are only 3 that have been confirmed so far, and it's likely more will be added. But what this means overall is that students in the coming years won't have the same freedom with UK applications that they currently do. Instead, there will be expectations on them to demonstrate a more balanced profile through a variety of activities.
So moving a little bit more towards the US model.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, Shafiq, you also grew up in Dubai, but you chose to study in Canada. Why?
So yes, testing, yes. So much like Ishan, I am a Dubai kid as well. I grew up here and I went to Canada for university. The reason I chose Canada was mostly because there was a guaranteed pathway for citizenship and permanent residency after university. But I do think that there's a big challenge when it comes to Canada is that there's a large misconception about the university structure. So when you're doing research for universities, you're going to find that across the board, you're going to get different stats. If you look at the acceptance rates for a lot of these universities, like UBC, for example, is like 49% last year. University of Toronto is 43% last year. McGill is 47% last year. That's a very high acceptance rate. So when you're looking at these, a lot of people think that getting into Canada is actually quite easy, but that's actually far from the truth. When you start looking at very specific subjects like computer science, engineering, math, for example, you're going to find that a lot of these subjects are more competitive the more specialized you go. For example, Waterloo has about 4.3% acceptance rate for the computer science subjects. And even then, there is the whole application process. Canada itself, because of the provinces, they have a very decentralized application process. You'll find that every university is looking for something very specific. Like UBC is very extracurricular focused. McGill is very academic focused. You're going to find that application timeline is going to be very different for every single universities. And you're going to find that for every program that you apply for, some schools will have very specific requirements. Not every school will have, for computer science, for example, not every school will require it, but like Waterloo's a computer science program, chemistry is going to be a subject. So your subject choice matters. So the biggest hurdle for most applications is diligence and like planning. You have to do a lot of planning. And also just to touch on that as well, there are also some programs which is first come, first serve. So it's really important that you apply early in the process, because when it comes to application times, a lot of people apply around November and December, and you'll find that if the application slots are already fulfilled, you might not be able to apply for them anymore. So it's really important that you plan from the very beginning which universities and make a good strategic plan about where to apply.
Amazing. A lot of students are drawn to the US because of co-ops, internships, study abroad. Do those exist in Canadian universities as well?
Yes, definitely. So in Canada is very, very big about experiential learning. You're going to find that when you're applying, that there's going to be a co-op option when you apply. And you don't necessarily have to pick it from the very beginning. A lot of universities have this option from your second year or your third year. You can always apply for it. The good thing about Canada is that there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to applying. A lot of schools have a very on-off option that you can do. So you could be studying for 4 months and then working for 4 months. You can take an entire year off if you want to study and then just to work. The good thing is also that these are paid work experiences. So you get paid and you get credit for them. So you have the option of kind of changing depending on how you want to do it based on certain industries, based on your academic studies. If you decide to change your majors, your co-op options can also change. A lot of the universities in Canada are very well connected. So they actually have a variety of options. So for Waterloo's program, for example, you have 4 months working, 4 months studying. And so by the end of your 4 years, you'll be working with about 5 different companies across different industries, which is valuable work experience when you graduate.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that experience. Back to the US now. Ukasha, why does the US remain the preeminent destination for international students for undergraduate study?
That's, I think, the perfect question to ask after some of the great points my colleagues made about the UK, Europe, and Canada, all worthwhile locations. So the US is home to 1 million international students that are housed across 3,000 institutes of higher learning. The U.S. at its center places the student. The aim is holistic development and multifaceted growth for students. It's not a sort of a tuition-based structure, which requires students focus on like a single discipline. It's really sort of diverse in the way that it allows students to focus on different disciplines. And it is in recognition of this fact that international applications to the US doubled over the last 4 or 5 years. So there's that. And it's also important to recognize that at its very center, again, at the core of the American educational experience, is flexibility. I personally don't know many 14 to 16-year-olds who can confidently say, I haven't come across them in the last 4 or 5 years, who can confidently say that, you know, they've figured everything out. They know exactly what they want to do for the next 4 years and perhaps the rest of their career. And this is where the US excels. It allows students to pair computer science with economics, history with philosophy, healthcare with business. So it allows for a high degree of flexibility. In fact, a full third of applications that go into the US are undecided in terms of major. Another third of students change their majors when they enroll at university within 2 years of being there. So the multidisciplinary or the interdisciplinary approach is really core to the US experience. Additionally, these offerings are backed up by a deep level of resources. This includes internship opportunities, co-op opportunities, learning communities, and research as well, which is big. Let's focus on research for a bit. US universities invested $100 billion in research over the last year alone, which is 3 times as much as the next country. Johns Hopkins invested $3 billion in research. All this money goes towards, better labs, more professors, better equipped students, better tech, and all of this contributes to, some of the most qualified undergraduates in the world and the highest paid as well. So for example, Harvey Mudd graduates in engineering, which is not a university many people have heard of, but Harvey Mudd graduates from engineering can earn somewhere around 112,000 USD. UIUC graduates in computer engineering can earn anywhere around 110,000 USD. So it's very rewarding in return on investment perspective. It's also important to note that they're generously backed up by the OPT program, which allows students to stay up to 36 months after graduating, and international students and getting work experience. So that's also a big competitive advantage compared to other regions. And finally, scholarships. This is big often for many, many families, for myself included. It's the most generous country in the world for that. The most wealthiest universities are generally in the US. A full 20 universities allow for full cost of attendance scholarships based on demonstrated financial need for international students. This includes University of Chicago, Emory, and so forth. And so many universities, dozens, also allow for merit-based scholarships, again, open to international students. And many of our students received these full cost of attendance scholarships to USC, NYU, Boston University, just to name a few. I'd like to mention 3 of my students here as well, Sarah, Dhruv, and On, who just between the 3 of them have a total of 1 million USD in scholarships. So, yeah.
Incredible work. Thank you. Now we know why students want to go to the US. If they want to prepare adequately, Aisha, when should they start doing so?
Yeah, that's a very popular question. Look, preparing for and applying to US universities is a 4-year process. From the very first day of high school, university admissions officers will be scrutinizing the record of your extracurricular involvement, down to the number of activities that you take, how many hours you're actively involved in those activities, even the weeks per year that you're committed to those activities. They will question your quantifiable impact in those clubs. It's not just about the leadership opportunities that you're in, but what have you managed to achieve in that time frame? Were you simply the president of the Eco Club, or were you able to launch an e-waste recycling initiative that collected over 40 tons of old, computers and cell phones, the way one of our students, Riva, did? Think of your first day in high school, I would say, as your first time on stage. You know, the curtains are drawn open and the spotlight is panned on you. Everyone's looking at you. It's overwhelming, for sure. So if you're to receive guidance from that very first moment, you're sure not to lose out on any opportunity to advance personal development, whether it's curating, or whether it's doing university-level research, or whether it's developing an app that connects student volunteers to local opportunities, or creating an arts portfolio that highlights your best work. I think those are all crucial to your academic portfolio. Another important part of the admissions process is your standardized testing preparation. So a standardized testing timeline should be mapped out a year in advance. Ideally, students in their second year of high school should sit for a full-length SAT or ACT exam to understand baseline scores and become aware of what kind of preparation is required to achieve their target. If you want to score really highly on a standardized test, you need to give it often at least 12 months, if not more, depending on individual students' needs and requirements, of course. According to research, it's interesting, it suggests that success on the verbal section of the SAT is assessed on how widely and regularly students read for pleasure. So a student should be exposed to a variety of literary texts, be it descriptive or narrative or argumentative. So yeah, I think all of these together will be able to kind of help a student create a really strong narrative. I think the short answer to when a child should begin counseling is really the sooner the better. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Now, the last question for our counselor panel is for you, Hishan. You were a former Hale student, now you're a Hale counselor. How can you best describe the Hale experience?
Sure. So I think the Hale experience ultimately comes down to mentorship. It's about bringing the best out of each and every one of our students. You know, no student's journey is the same. The sentiment you'll keep hearing today. It's also about creating a comprehensive infrastructure, unique to the student that will support them no matter when they join, right? All from when you sign up with Hale and join the Hale family up until you get on the plane to go towards your university, right? Where you'll be spending the next few years of your life. To quote my Hale counselor at the time, with a sentiment that still runs very true today, you get as much from this process as you put into it. I was always actively looking for more as an aspirational student who wanted to go to an Ivy League. I was following my counselor's instructions to the T, looking to boost my grades, my extracurriculars, write essays as best as I can, and whatnot. But ultimately, it's also not just the independent person that you're depending on, right? It's not just one counselor. We are a team that come together to support the unique needs of the students, whether that be a different level of expertise than their primary counselor is expected to support. There are other people there who are part of the same team who can jump in and help the student's specific needs. I think one very vivid experience for me was when Hale helped me identify a Columbia summer program experience. And after doing well in that experience, I befriended a law professor there. I came back to work with my consultant, and she shared with me that I should continue this relationship, foster a developing relationship where, I speak to him about daily life, current affairs, and, get closer to him. And, luckily I listened to her, and a few months later, he offered me an ambassadorship for his summer programs. And that was my first job. And he then later offered to write my supplementary recommendation for my common application, which, as you can imagine, held some great weighting in my admissions decisions and ultimate success. I think it boils down to, ambition. The sky is the limit, but it depends on if the student's ambition is matched by their commitment. Everyone has the dreams of attending these top institutions, but it's really that committed drive and the commitment to the Hale process that will get you over that finishing line and get you to the goals that you aspire to reach. I think the biggest takeaway, is whether you're in 8th grade or in senior year, we are there for you every step of the way, and that there's no problem that we cannot solve together. The ultimate goal is to get you into your dream school in the exact same way that my Hale counselor did for me.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hishan, Aisha, Ukasha, Shafiq, Sam, Bilal. Thank you. We are going to welcome our Ivy Insider panelists to the stage, the stars of the show. starting with Anaga Ramaswamy. Please help us in welcoming her. Anaga goes to Delhi Private School. She will be attending Stanford University in the fall and studying computer science. Please help me in welcoming Mohammed Al Saud. Mohammed goes to Basel Al Assad School in Syria and will be studying architecture at Brown University. Please help me in welcoming Wian Wilson. Wian goes to James Wellington International School. Will be going to Columbia to study politics and economics. Next, we have Arnav Kedia. Arnav goes to GEMS World Academy and will be studying management, entrepreneurship, and technology at UC Berkeley in the fall. We also have Aryan Sauni. Aryan goes to DIA, Dubai International Academy, and will be studying computer science at Brown. Last but not least, Kshitij Kant. Kshitij will also be attending Stanford to study economics. Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. So we plan to leave, as Julia said, quite a bit of time for Q&A at the end. You can feel free to to ask targeted questions to individual students or to the panel in its entirety. So, Arnav, let's start with you. You were accepted to a very unique program, Berkeley's MET program in management, entrepreneurship, and technology. It only accepts 50 students per year. How did you select this program, and what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome to get there?
So I've always been the type of student who's been interested in engineering and innovation. Since a young age, I've enjoyed playing around with things, trying to create something different, from Legos, from ant farms. So I think that this initial exposure to creation and innovation has always spurred me to try and create an impact through engineering. And I guess this first materialized through Buddy Bear. Buddy Bear was my first tech startup, and it's a teddy bear for children with sensors to measure a variety of medical symptoms. The idea is that we're able to use a teddy bear to serve as a holistic medical checkup for children aged 2 to 9. I think that after I created Buddy Bear, I was obviously happy having undergone the entire process of circuitry and coding, but I think there was still a part of me that was not satisfied with the finished product. I realized that I've created something pretty cool, but how can we take this to the next level? How can we actually bring this product to children, to the target audience for the product? So I was able to reach out to hospital groups, clinics, and schools in the UAE, and we were able to get prototypes of Buddy Bear in the hands of the target audience of children aged 2 to 9. And I think this was my first exposure to what tech entrepreneurship really means. It's about creating a product, but at the same time, being able to take what you've created and bring it to the masses, actually create an impact. I then took the spirit of tech entrepreneurship into starting my second startup, Carbon Wallet. Carbon Wallet is an application for children which basically incentivizes youth to participate in more sustainable and environmentally friendly activities. With Carbon Wallet, you're able to receive points for participating in activities such as recycling or beach cleanups, and then these points can be accumulated to access a variety of different rewards. Once again, after having developed the application along with my co-founders, I realized that there is a potential to take this one step further. And with Carbon Wallet, we were able to work with educational groups in order to implement the application in the hands of children in the UAE, India, and Nepal. I think that once again, this idea of being able to not only be the person in charge of the creation of something, but its execution is something that's really appealed to me right now. And that's where I found my fit in Berkeley MET. Berkeley MET, as Peter mentioned, is a relatively unique program in the sense that you're able to access 2 degrees, one in engineering and one in business. this differs to a traditional double major, as you're able to receive separate degrees rather than one combined degree. So at Berkeley MET, I'll be doing a degree in mechanical engineering from Berkeley School of Engineering and a degree in business from the Hale School of Business. Again, I think that what appeals to me about this program is the idea of being able to gain the technical fundamental skills through the engineering program, and at the same time, gain the business acumen through pitching, through the ability to find investors and sponsors for my ideas, to be able to create a startup from scratch. And I think everyone today, including the counselors, have mentioned the importance of finding a fit for your unique interests. I think having identified tech entrepreneurship as my interest from a young age, Berkeley MET seemed to be the perfect place to not only gain the academic exposure through engineering and business to become a successful tech entrepreneur, but at the same time, being a part of a group of only 50 people that are on the same wavelength of trying to combine these two degrees is something that's really appealing. Through such a selective dual degree program, I'm able to get access into a guaranteed internship in Silicon Valley, something which I think could help set me forward in my dream of launching my own startup within Silicon Valley. So I think that's the cusp of my journey.
Amazing. So what was the inspiration behind Buddy Bear, and how old were you when you launched the project?
I launched Buddy Bear in my first year of middle school in grade 11. I think the inspiration behind it was my frequent visits to the doctor's office. I thought that the entire process of going to the doctor was pretty mundane as a child, not something really interesting, and children are pretty scared to for the doctors to be using these variety of medical devices. So I thought that if we take the traditional sensors like heartbeat, pulse, temperature, and place them on a teddy bear instead, then that's something where we can reinvent the status quo of how healthcare operates for children.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Sichis, you were able to get into Stanford, the most selective university in America, along with Anaga. What do you ascribe your success to?
I think, of course, there's a multitude of factors that really go into such a process. And universities in the US, they evaluate your application based on looking at a person, looking at you in terms of your personality, and very importantly, future potential. They want to see whether what you do in high school, however insignificant, whether you can scale that up to something that makes a global impact in the future. So for me personally, through my application, I ensured that I included every aspect of my personality, whether that is my love for speech and debate, or whether that is my interest in visiting embassies and speaking to diplomats about how they are helping their local communities here in Dubai. I feel like including every aspect of your personality and allowing the university to decide whether they believe that you're a good fit in their community is one of the pillars that ensure that universities are able to choose students that fit into their community. Along with that, yeah.
No, please expand. You want to say something else there. You had a little bit more insight.
I also wanted to actually mention that many students have this misconception that there's a formula to get into Stanford, to get into Harvard. And the reality is that there isn't. It's just you demonstrating your love for paint, your interest in building Legos, like Arnav said, your love for painting, anything it may be. So yeah.
Do you agree with that, Anaga?
For sure. So adding on to what Kshitij said, I think for Stanford specifically and many other universities, being true to yourself is extremely important. Of course, there's your high school track record, your SAT scores, but they also look into who you are as a person. For me, what I felt stood out in my application was how I used my experiences and my story in computer science as a girl to sort of turn that into opportunity for the people around me. So taking my one of my extracurriculars as an example, I built this education technology platform called Computex, where we basically educate K through 12 students in computer science. And what I wanted to show through that was, regardless of your background, regardless of your age, regardless of when you're starting, me personally, I wasn't your typical computer science applicant. I actually started coding only maybe in 11th grade, even though I had interest in STEM throughout.
So I was new to the process. I felt that maybe having more engaging resources and having a more inclusive community would have helped me. So I sort of had this thought in mind that if I was extending a hand to my younger self, what would I do? And that's how I built Computex. And also, I don't think that anyone should be afraid to put anything on their application. There's, like Kshitij said, there's no set formula to this. You don't have to present yourself as this individual who's constantly involved in academics only. Some things that you might find seemingly silly. For example, I talked about my love for air fryers and napping and football on the side, and I think they really have a holistic view to your application apart from who you are academically. So,
do you think you're the best coder your age in Dubai?
Definitely not. I mean, we have Aryan here, so...
Okay. Okay. Do you think you're the best coder in your school?
Again, no. When I was put into my computer science in 11th grade, I was in a class of students who knew maybe 5 programming languages, a student who had built a computer in 5th grade, and I had never taken a coding lesson in my life. So it did get lonely. So yeah, like I said, turning adversity into opportunity. I think that really stood out to them and it was meaningful to me. So I put that out there.
So, but you were probably the most effective at using computer science for social impact, maybe in the UAE.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more how you were able to do that? Because I think that was definitive in your journey.
Right. So, like I said, it did get lonely in the beginning, knowing that there were so many people sharing the same goal, but had a head start of a couple of years. I realized that many other girls were in the same situation as me and they felt the same way I did. So we came together and we put up Computex, and we started off by reaching out to middle schoolers, to students in primary, not necessarily to students who wanted to pursue computer science, but even students who wanted to explore it. We basically wanted to let them know that there's no set space for this. You can explore all these topics and never go into computer science. You don't necessarily need to do what other coders at your age are doing. Just getting started in itself is enough. And yeah.
And social impact, right?
Right. Social impact. We reached out to over, I think, 200 students, both within our school. We had great feedback as well. So I'm really glad that happened, because I know that I would have really loved to have something like that.
Amazing. So CES as a vehicle for empowerment, impact, not strictly for personal projects, right? Amazing. So speaking of CS, Aryan, another CS major, you come from probably the most competitive demographic, South Asian, male, CS aspiring major. You're going to go to Brown, but you're also accepted to UC Berkeley, which has, I think, a top 3 or 4 CS program. Talk a little bit about your CS experiences and why you are going to Brown. I think a lot of people will be surprised to understand the reasons behind it.
Right. So I think I'll probably start with, I was essentially stuck in the kind of mold of all the people that Anaga was describing in her school. And I think my entire role was trying to break free of that stereotype. And that's how I had to differentiate myself to these top universities. And I think my vehicle for that was really extending the impact of my use of computers into the wider world, demonstrating into the real world how I can use computers to make it a better place, not just through my academic endeavors, just learning, memorizing programming languages, but in fact, applying the skills into the greater world. And I think one of my projects, Revision Dojo, was one that I came into not really expecting much. Just I came and thought seemed like a fun thing to do, and I got started on it. And as we kept growing and as we kept spreading it across more people and more people just not even in our school, but into the world in its entirety, we started to realize that we were unique in that we had the privilege of being the very target audience of what we were trying to achieve. And I think that really propelled us to deliver an experience to IB students around the world that you might not have expected. And I think this was a real manifestation of just a culmination of everything, just me, what I've learned over the years, and putting that in place into something that demonstrates my impact on the world. And all these universities, they're looking for the change makers, and change makers can come in different forms. Like obviously you've seen Anaga's example, and one example that I wanted to do was through more of a startup lens, similar to Arnav here as well.
So talk about how you quantified your impact when you talk about helping IB students from around the world. How big of an impact was it?
Sure thing. So we started off pretty small, but we ended up actually going viral on TikTok out of all platforms. And that really sent our growth spiraling. So we started off with, I think, just 2,000 users or so in the first month or so. But then we went viral on one platform, got 10K in a day, essentially. And then a TikTok video got 500,000 views in a day. And that really sent it spiraling. I had people in class talking about Vision Dojo, not knowing I was right behind them. And that whole experience really increased the impact of it just beyond just our school, beyond just our country even, into the entire world as a whole. And now we have almost 100,000 users, which is pretty much half the IB market. And yeah.
So you can go viral on TikTok without dancing. It's possible.
It is very much possible, yes.
There's hope for me then. Excellent. So, Wian, I'm so happy that I get to share the stage with at least one other social science scientist, I would say. You had a pretty interesting road to Columbia, an eclectic set of academic interests. So talk a little bit about your journey, please.
Okay. Before I start, proud Revision Dojo user here. So I was fangirling when I met him a little bit earlier ago. But so to understand my journey to Columbia and the struggles that went along with it, I think you have to understand the challenge that I faced early on. So I was part of this program at my school that helped young children buddy up with a book, because I love reading and I think it's my birthright to pass that on to everybody that I meet. And so I came across this young girl who really hated reading. She had a really true resistance to it. And I wondered why, because I love it so much. I just couldn't understand why she didn't. And she said that she never saw anybody who looked like her or anybody who had experiences like her in the books that she read. And, slowly I realized this too. In my school library, in our local libraries, there aren't a lot of books, a lot of literature that reflect our unique experiences, especially in the education that we study, the history that we study. I think there's not a lot of faces like mine. There's not a lot of faces like that girl's. And I think that that's very important for me and for us to change. And so I started on that journey. I started on the journey in local libraries and then in our local curriculum, and hopefully on a mission to change it nationwide. We worked with multiple schools, impacted tens of thousands of people, and improved diversity and inclusion in education across the UAE. And I think that's a mission very close to my heart. And I think that's a challenge that, brought me towards Columbia, because Columbia has a person that I read probably a little bit too much, Kimberly Crenshaw, and she was my initial draw to Columbia. She teaches there, and I would die to take her class. But then you couple that with the core curriculum where you can study anything from music humanities to literature humanities to the arts, philosophy, and then, you're in the heart of the greatest city on the planet. Sorry, guys, I have to say that New York is the greatest city on the planet. And I think that, that makes Columbia an truly unbeatable experience. And, it captured my heart, which is what leads to my second challenge, which was when I was deferred early decision. So for those of you who are new to the process, if you are very passionate about a school like I am, you can choose to apply to it early decision, which is a binding contract. You have application date a little bit earlier, and if you get in, you have to go. That's how sure I was of Columbia. I signed a legal contract. My mom signed a legal contract, so we were very much locked in. If I got in, I would go. And so it was December 15th, I believe. I was there with my whole family, and we opened my decision, and it said it was deferred. So a deferral is not a rejection. It just means I moved to the regular applicant pool, which is a bit later. But, it hurt just the same. Absolute soul crushing. I took it just as a rejection because you spend so much time researching these schools, falling in love with the school. And then, when they say, we'll decide a little bit later, it hurts. So I think, that deferral, it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me to not be so singular in my thinking. For so long, I was like, Columbia, that's all I want. That, a little bit later in the regular decision pool, when I got into some fantastic schools, I realized that, it truly was not the end of the world if I didn't get into Columbia. And then I got into Columbia. So, ironically, I am going to Columbia even after they deferred me. But my love for the school stayed the same. And even though there were challenges along the way, it was not easy. But I'm very happy to be the class of 2028.
Congratulations, you earned it. Say with me, a deferral is not a rejection. A deferral is not a rejection. A deferral is not a rejection.
Peter, I wanted also to say something about the experience of Wian here. I think I went... Is this on? Yeah, I think I went through the same experience with Brown. And this is something that I wanted to share with our audience here, that if you do end up applying to U.S. universities, and I'm guessing you are, please do extensive college research. Don't just focus or fixate on one university or one college and just attach all your hopes and dreams to that one college, because there are plenty, and I can assure you of that. There are plenty of universities that are the right fit for you. You just have not discovered them. And that's something that I would tell myself when I was applying to Brown in the early decision as well. I would have told them to really look more into schools, because I put myself in a pretty dangerous zone. Is that if I don't get into Brown, I would not have known what else to choose. And that, I guess, should relate to college research. Do enough college research and find a lot of schools like the school that you are applying to.
Amazing. So just by a show of hands, who here was accepted early to their top choice on this stage? Right? So you have to be resilient. You can never define your success by acceptance to one university or the other. And if you get deferred, right, I think you can use it as fuel for the fire to work harder on your other applications and to also submit additional information for the regular decision round. And maybe Anaga, Kshitij, anyone up here wants to add some more light as to how that initial deferral, how you were able to process it and deal with it.
I was actually deferred from UPenn, which was my ED. And at that time, of course, it was quite hurtful because I did want to go to UPenn at the time. But when I was deferred, I realized that it isn't the end of the world. All I had to do was continue applying. So in my RD round, I actually applied to, I think, 6 IVs. And on IV day, I was rejected from all of them as well. But again, the Stanford decision came out the day after IV day. So I had hope. I knew that it isn't the end of the world. Even if Stanford had rejected me, I think I would have been happy. It just is having the hope that you will end up okay.
I think you always end up where you belong, right? You believe that's the case?
For sure. So for me, I actually only picked 2 IVs to apply to, and one of them was Cornell, and that was my ED. And so that was, again, the first university that I got a decision from, if I'm not wrong. And that was a rejection. No deferral, just flat out rejection. So again, pretty soul crushing because I knew that there was no further hope for Cornell. And like Wian said, I spent a lot of time learning about Cornell, loving Cornell. But it was just redirection for me. It opened my mind up to so many new experiences. And with Stanford, I spent so much time reading about Stanford, and I realized that all along it was the perfect fit for me. And I think whatever was meant to happen happened. Yeah.
I think rejection is part of the process always. And I think you see all the panelists here. It all worked out, right?
Peter, I want to share something that my counselor, Megan, who couldn't be here with us today, said to me when I got deferred from Columbia. She said that, these admissions counselors read tens of thousands of applications, and they spend time at the university. This is their job, to pick the perfect students who's going to fit in. So if they didn't pick you, it's probably not a fault with yourself. But it's just that you probably wouldn't fit in with that school because they know the school best. So don't take it as a rejection. Take it more in the sense that you probably wouldn't have been happy there, and they realized that before you did.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more, because every university has a personality, right? It has a campus culture, and they have their own needs as well. So they're not passing judgment on your academic preparedness, right? On, your potential contributions. Just, will you be a good fit for the university, and will it be a good fit for you? When you get to that highest level, we've seen everybody here, eventually they got into more selective universities than they were initially deferred or rejected by in the early rounds, right? Arnav, the 50 kids got into MET, right? But you're rejected by some other universities that had higher acceptance rates. You are chomping at the bit to say something, are you?
Yeah, and I think fit in particular is extremely important. And actually, like Peter mentioned before, I chose Brown over Berkeley, which is amongst the top schools in the world for computer science. And I think the biggest reason for that was university is a place that you're going to be spending 4 of what many would describe as your best years of your life in. And part of that experience is not just the academics, but also the people who you'll be surrounded with. And what's very important is how you emotionally connect with the school, with the people. And because the truth is, the place that you will be happy at is also a place that you'll likely be most driven to work the most at, to put your best foot forward at. And for me, after talking to lots and lots of students at Brown, at Berkeley, other people who are admitted to Berkeley, other people who are admitted to Brown, such as Mohammed here, I actually realized that I had an insanely positive interaction with basically everyone at my accepted to Brown alongside me. And that just really solidified my own decision to take Brown. And at the end of the day, so what? It's a few places ranked lower than Berkeley. At the end of the day, it's down to the individual. It's what you make out of your own college experience. And for me, I feel like I was going to make the most out of my Brown experience. And that's why I chose Brown.
And just to add on to that, I think a way that I would sum it up is that a university looks for a well-rounded class rather than a well-rounded person. They don't want a person who has a 1600 SAT. They want to find the person who would best fit in with everybody else in that class.
So I'm glad you brought that up because, a word that gets thrown around a lot in admissions is spike. You have to be spiky, right? You have to have a spike. So did you guys have a spike? Did you have one spike? Did you have several spikes? Maybe Anaga, we'll start with you and work our way down.
Right. So I didn't have a particular spike to start with. Like I mentioned before, my extracurriculars, most of them at least, came out of my own experiences. And the others were things that I genuinely enjoyed doing, things that gave me joy. So whether that was football, music, volunteering, or even being the head girl at my school. So there was no specific spike to start with. Like Kshitij said, there's no formula to it. You don't go into the process with this set in your mind. And I think you should be open to all sorts of opportunities. And what I noticed was that by the time I was done writing this application, by the time I put it out there, I realized that I did, in fact, have a spike, and that was using computer science to uplift women and maybe even help women in situations. So another one of my extracurriculars was Her Guardian. I noticed that in Delhi, going out as a woman after maybe 6:30 is definitely looked down upon. It's not safe because of all the misogynistic violence, the assault rates. So Her Guardian actually uses your phone's internal gyroscope to sense alarming jolts and send your location coordinates to emergency contacts and to the authorities. And this came because I participated in this research internship that I did where I learned about machine learning in music recommendation, which is a field I had never explored before. So if I hadn't just stepped out there, taken that opportunity, I wouldn't have done the research. I wouldn't have gotten into this niche of HCI and machine learning. So you might notice a spike as you're going through the application process, but you definitely don't enter your process with a spike.
It's interesting because now in retrospect, you can say that and you can see it. What do you think about some students developing a spike for the express intention of getting into a top university? Do you think it works?
I'm not sure. I don't think it would work in every case. Of course, it might work by chance. But I think picking a spike going into the process is just you putting yourself in this box and not exploring opportunities. There are so many competitions that I attended, that I participated in. The research internship I mentioned, a civil engineering competition that I went to. And if I hadn't participated in these activities, I would have never had my mind open to all these new fields. So yeah, never stop learning. I think that's the most important thing. And going in with a spike heavily limits that. So I wouldn't recommend it at all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Mohammed?
I relate a lot to what Anaga said because for me personally, I didn't know I would be applying to US universities before 11th grade. So all my extracurriculars, my classes, the courses I took were not with the intention of getting into a certain school. And that's kind of one of the things that I, give credit to Hale Education the most, because when I started working with Hale, I showed my counselor Bilal over there. I showed him like a whole package of the things that I did, the classes that I took, and we just worked with each other from there to develop kind of a narrative. Like the narrative was there, I just didn't notice it. And that's, I think, some heavy misconception about Spike, that it's one solid thing. It's not something that you figure out along the journey of applying to college.
It sounds like it was very organic for both of you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Was that the same for you, Ian? Do you have one spike or multiple spikes? Lots of little ones? One big one?
So, as you guys heard before, my major that I'm going into is political science and economics. Although there might be, some areas to, have extracurricular centered around economics, here we don't really have the opportunity to get a lot involved in political engagement, right? So I think I showed my passion for political engagement, but also just for advocacy through my extracurriculars. And yes, I do believe I had one big spike, not little tiny spikes. But I think that was just by following my true passion, right? So everything that I try to do or that I try to encompass is to try to give people a voice. People who don't necessarily see themselves in these situations, try to give them a voice. So, along with my education initiative, I started the magazine at my school. And I use that to have children who don't necessarily believe that they should have a voice that's important enough to talk about. I think we teach them that, their voice is valuable. I think that goes a really long way. So I did have that spike of advocacy and, social impact that you talked about. And I truly think that that's what differentiates me because, as I said before, these admissions officers, it's their jobs to read through these tens of thousands of applications. They can sense genuine authenticity and they can sense when somebody is just doing something to add it to their extracurricular list or to add it to their CV. So when you follow your passions, I think you might end up with a spike. And even if, Peter said that's one big spike or tiny little spikes that, accumulate, I think it's really important to follow, what you love. And if you're good at something like CS, how can you use that to make an impact? How can you use what you're good at to change the community that you're in? And if you follow that, I think, regardless of what you do, you'll find your spike.
That's it's really important that you brought that up because a lot of people think a spike is something that really sets them apart from the rest of their community or like makes them stand out individually. from the people I've talked to and the people that have told me about their experiences applying to college, most of them, their spikes have been about how they used their interests to blend in with their community and elevate that community. So I don't think a spike should be something that you kind of curate to like make up a personality for the admissions officer, rather about how you elevate your community within your interests.
And you could do that lots of different ways. I think, Arnav, you were able to do that beyond the realm of engineering/innovation/business.
Yeah, exactly. So I think although tech entrepreneurship has always been my spike, I think it's important to acknowledge that every single one of us isn't one-dimensional. We all have multiple facets to ourselves, and it's important to demonstrate those other areas. Even though I was applying to highly specialized programs in engineering and entrepreneurship, I still thought that it was important to showcase other aspects to my personality and interests. Because at the end of the day, universities aren't only admitting you as a student, they're admitting you as a person that's going to be on their campus for 4 years. They want someone who's actually going to contribute as much as possible in their unique way to their campus. So for me, I didn't hesitate to talk about drama, acting in my essays. That's something that I've enjoyed since a young age, participating in, I think, every single musical in my school. And I think that having the showcasing the other layer to yourself in your application will always be valuable in demonstrating to admissions officers that you're someone that can make an impact on their campus in different ways. But at the same time, I think, as other panelists mentioned, this isn't something that you can really force. As Bian mentioned, admissions officers are trained in detecting what they see as truth and what they see as a misrepresentation or an outright lie. Their entire job is to be able to see whether you're someone authentic, whether you're someone that they can truly see fitting the vibe of their campus. So anything that you set your mind to doing, I think it's important to do it in depth and demonstrate that this is something that you're actually interested in, something that you've dedicated time and effort to elevate to the next level. So, for example, MUN is something that I think almost every single panelist has been involved in to some capacity, but attending one random conference as a delegate isn't going to get you into a top university. I think when you actually try to take on further leadership roles within a program like MUN, when you try to add something different to your school's local conference, that's where university officers get interested, because MUN is on every second kid's activities list. So I think that we were all able to take leadership roles within our respective schools' conferences. At my school, we were able to invite His Excellency Ban Ki-moon to join our event and deliver the keynote speech. And as Mohammed mentioned, I think elevating your community is another important aspect of any passion project that you embark on. For me, again, instead of taking the traditional route of tech entrepreneurship, I decided to deviate from that slightly in forming my school's, the UAE's first ever student-led entrepreneurship incubator. The idea behind that was to empower younger students in primary school and middle school to understand their entrepreneurial potential. I was able to personally mentor around 300 students over the course of my high school career, and we were able to deliver weekly sessions tailored in various areas of entrepreneurship. And at the end of each year's event, students had the opportunity to pitch their business ideas to a panel of entrepreneurs from the Middle East for investment. So I think being able to, when you don't see an opportunity, being able to take the initiative to create it is something that's really important. I think Hisham mentioned before that as Dubai kids, we might be constrained in a typical narrative of multiculturalism. But I think that having the initiative to go beyond that and try to see how you can make your interests align with real tangible community impact is something that can set you apart.
Shitish, I think you turned a crisis into opportunity with your research project.
Yeah, so actually I want to mention two separate spikes that I reflected and realized. The first one being my real estate research project, which actually began from an internship I did at a real estate firm back in the summer of my 10th grade. At this internship, I was first introduced to the world of real estate, and I learned how the market dynamics work, and applied the theoretical economics I learned to this real world scenario. But that got me wondering, since this was just after the work of the COVID pandemic, how the pandemic may have impacted the real estate sector in Dubai. So I actually decided to conduct a research project on this exact issue, how Dubai's real estate was impacted by COVID-19. And at the beginning, I reached out to some professors, hoping for them to mentor me throughout this research project. But I was actually refused. I received very few replies, and even the replies I got were all sorry, I'm very busy, or some other reason. And so I decided that why do I need a professor to pursue and find information about something that I'm curious about? So I went ahead and I actually pursued this research project on my own independently. I completed it in the summer, and I actually published it as well, all on my own. And I feel like something that everyone can take away from my experience is creating your curiosity into opportunity. Lots of students, they look for opportunities at their high school, online, but many times you don't find these opportunities. So I really recommend that when you don't find such opportunity, go ahead and create it for yourself.
There's a famous quote by Hannibal, right? Either we will find a way or make one. Sounds like you made your own way.
Yes. And then another spike that I could think of for myself was the experience that I gained when I helped my parents manage our household finances. I actually went ahead and applied this information during my finance internship at Shelf Drilling. And over here from this, I learned how you can create a sort of narrative, taking 2 or 3 activities and sort of forming them into a story of how you gain skills at one activity, and then you take those skills and transfer them throughout everything else you do.
Right. It's almost like interweaving seemingly disparate threads into a single narrative.
Yeah. And another thing I learned from that is that you can't reverse engineer this process. It has to be authentic. If you try to reverse engineer it, most often than not, from other seniors I've seen applying, it doesn't work out. It seems very artificial. It seems like you've tried to construct it, and it doesn't work out.
And it's transparent to skilled eyes, I think.
Yeah.
You have something, Mohammed, you want to say?
Oh, yes. I wanted to add to the independent research kind of topic, since we're already talking about it. When the earthquake hit Syria and Turkey earlier in 2023, a lot of families were actually like fleeing their homes panicking, fleeing their homes, and my family included. And when I try to go and look for research that shows info about like when we should fear our building falling, what kind of things play into that, I couldn't find any done in the region. So I went out and did my own. I traveled to the places that got hit by the earthquake in Syria. I worked with engineers, with architects, with professors to actually gain info about how topographical differences play a role in these, tragedies, and how material ratios used in buildings do also add to this kind of event. And then I got a comprehensive research and I gave it to my relatives. So I think if everybody in this room went out and didn't, constrain themselves to working with a professor or working with a teacher to do a research about something that they're interested in, I think we would be on a different level academically, because we can explore without being restrained.
Amazing. Aryan, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do agree with that, and especially about the whole learning and being freedom to explore without restraint. I think that's extremely important. And actually for me, I was fortunate to have known from a pretty early age what I wanted to do, which was computer science. But that by no means stopped my exploration. And over the last 4 years, trust me, I tried basically every niche under the sun. So you can see me trying out AI in healthcare, computer science in the context of an MUN, even working on computer science in education for researchers, making a note-taking app, all sorts of things were just explorations that just helped me understand what in particular in computer science I wanted to do. And I think this sort of exploration just in generally around the field helped me establish some specific niches that kind of fit more into what I wanted to do. And I think one of these niches was education, which, as I mentioned about Revision Dojo, but another one, and it's actually a story about how one of the starting points for me into computer science, which was me joining an open source project back when I was in my freshman year. And that open source project, for those of you guys who don't know what open source is, it's a form of collaboration at a large global scale where multiple people work on a project or like an app that's together. And for examples of open source projects, there's like Chrome and Linux, which are all made in those formats. So I took that opportunity to join the community just out of curiosity, learning about what the app was doing and just talking to people. But as I dived deeper in, I started coding a little bit on the side. I noticed a bug. I thought, why not try fix it? Even though it was a new language, it was just an opportunity for me to learn and try it. And so that kept on going forward, and eventually I joined as an intern in the app. And then finally, actually, I started making YouTube videos, explaining to other people how to use the app, hosting webinars, and this just kept escalating. And I eventually built up a large Twitter following as well. And throughout all of this, I began establishing sort of network, like I believe Mohammed mentioned about not letting these opportunities sort of define, sort of setting you up rather than searching for opportunities. By casting a wide enough net, you can let opportunities essentially fall into what you guys want to do. So in a sort of serendipitous way, you can get these opportunities to come to you. And one of these opportunities was a researcher who contacted me on Twitter to make a project based off of my work on the open source projects. And this project ended up helping almost over 1,000 researchers around the world, and even got funding from various universities. And I feel like that's an experience that was only possible because I casted a wide net right from the start that allowed me to explore my interests, but also develop a niche in the specific subfield that enabled me to learn. And
so be curious, be unafraid, and be okay with failing, right? Sometimes things are not going to work out.
I failed a lot in that entire process.
Failure is necessary to succeed, right? On research, is research only for STEM kids? Do we have hope?
So I think a lot of people have the misconception that research is, mostly valued in STEM. Oh my God, you did engineering research? That's so cool. You did political science research? Okay. No, so I did research in sociology and political economy. And I think, in my classrooms, I learned a lot about economics and I learned a lot about political science. But it doesn't matter what we learn in theory. What matters is, how does the policies that we enforce change the world around us? How does society and the institutions that we have interact with these policies? And I think that's incredibly valuable to explore. And, I think that it's very important to me that I understand that if I'm going to be a policymaker in the future, if I'm going to change laws, right? And, I had the same struggle that Kshitij was talking about, which was, I reached out to professors, but not a lot of them replied back. So I worked with Pioneer Academics, which is a summer program, which, you can learn more about, I'm sure, when we have our little breakout sessions. But it pairs you with a professor and, you guys do a research project together. And I think it was incredibly valuable to have this professor guide me. And he also ended up writing one of my supplementary letters of recommendation, which, when it says professor at University of Washington, St. Louis, it carries a lot more gravity than just your regular English teacher, So I think it was very valuable for me to do that, both for myself, because I was learning about this field that I was really interested in, but also to help me get to where I want to be.
Amazing. Arnav?
Yeah, I think there's something important to mention is that academics is only the first step in the US admission process. If we compare to the UK, for example, where I applied through UCAS to 5 universities, academics is almost the start and the end of the entire process. I think with the US, it's important to understand that, yes, SATs and your general transcript are important, but they're important to the extent that they're the first thing that are going to be considered and used to differentiate between applicants. But beyond that, it's the other sources of intellectual curiosity, such as research, such as internships, such as the extracurricular activities that you devote your time to on a daily basis that are truly going to make a difference in helping candidate A stand out from candidate B. So I think if there's one piece of advice that collectively as a panel we can give to the audience is to make sure that you're taking your current curiosity for a topic and trying to take it to the next level, see how you can further your knowledge and at the same time try and give back to the community around you.
Yes, Anaga?
Yeah, adding on to that, on the topic of social impact, I think a misconception that many people have is that it's important to show universities that you have maybe 200 plus hours, that stamp of hours of volunteering, but community service and social impact can be done through the things that you love. For me, that was computer science. It could be through your other interests, through recreational interests, but it does not have to be passive volunteering. You can actively help the community through your passions, through your interests, and I think universities do like seeing that.
Amazing insight. So before we head over to the Q&A, I'd like to ask you each one final question. Okay? If you could go back in time 2-3 years ago and give your younger self a piece of advice, some perspective that you have now on this journey. Right? We didn't even talk about the applications themselves, but I think the applications are really the culmination of the journey, right? Everything that comes beforehand is so much more important. The applications are the execution. So what advice would you give to your younger self on any of this process? And we can start with you, Anaga, and move down the line.
All right. For me personally, I think the most important thing was believing in myself. Like I mentioned before, I was not a typical desk-bound programmer. I wasn't always sure of going into computer science. I just knew that I had an interest in STEM. So taking it one day at a time, 1 week at a time, a month at a time, that's all right. You should go at your own pace. It's important not to compare yourself with others. And coming to the process itself, what I mentioned before, my first decision being a rejection, it's basically a university that you put so much love and effort into for writing your essays saying that, oh, we don't think you'd be a good fit here. I think not letting that decision demotivate me was extremely important. Instead, I just used that as fuel, like you mentioned, to keep going, keep exploring my interests, open myself up to more opportunities, and believing in myself. And also for me personally, coming from a CBSE school and Indian school, I didn't have a lot of peers that had the same goal as I did, and that got hard at times because you have these deadlines and everyone else is focusing on a different thing, and you often feel like not everyone understands what you're going through. So being there for yourself, I think, is extremely important.
Amazing. And that initial rejection was maybe the biggest blessing in disguise. You just didn't know it then. Amazing. Thank you. How about you, Mohammed?
Well, I think if we're talking like 2-3 years ago, I would tell myself to not be afraid to go big. I had a lot of, projects, things that I worked on and had an interest on, but just kind of left halfway undone because I did not believe that I could, take it to the next level. I think everybody here should try, even with the least significant project, to take that one step further to see where their project could go, just to get that, that journey with its flaws, with its failures. That's going to be essential when you're applying to college. And if we're talking about college applications, I think I would tell myself to not get too attached to the material that I'm preparing. Sometimes when we like write an essay, we put a lot of our, emotions, our story in it. We can get kind of attached to it. And really in college applications, trying again is the key. Don't write one essay, write 5. Don't write 5, write 10 if you can. And then you can see what kind of represents you the most. So, yeah.
I think as you write the essays, it becomes easier because you maybe haven't been, compelled to find your voice before. But once you start to find it,
definitely,
it becomes magnified with each piece of writing. Amazing insight. Thank you. Leon?
I'd say just pause, take a second and look at the people that surround you. Because when you get your deferral from Columbia or your rejection from other schools, it's not going to be your extracurriculars that support you. It's going to be your friends and family that are there along the way. So foster those connections, and it's okay to, have a little bit of a work-life balance. I think that's important. When it comes to specifically the application process, I would like to touch on, just genuine authenticity, because it can be very difficult. And, I struggle with this. I want to seem smart, right? And that's like a crazy thing to say. When you're writing these applications, you want to think that the person on the other side reading them thinks that you're smart and thinks that you're funny or creative. And, Megan my counselor was like, just let loose a little bit. Don't take it too seriously. You're allowed to be funny. You're allowed to be silly. Like one of my essays for Georgetown was about how like me and my friends do like a talk show segment from Jimmy Kimmel when we're doing our makeup, and it's like fun. It's like silly, and they value that you're a human and that you're flawed and that you're not perfect and you're not smart all the time, and that's okay. And it's okay to write about things that are not perfect.
One of my favorite essays from this year was by a student who wrote about being a ladybug lifeguard, how she would go and save ladybugs from the pool. Right, that was her passion. Right. So be unafraid to be yourself, right? Amazing. Arna?
Well, the best way I could sum this up is don't be afraid to tell your story and how that story can continue at that particular university. I think I joined Hale in grade 9, and at that point, I thought I was a really strong writer, but I turned out to be a strong writer in the sense of writing academic essays for the IB, not so much in terms of writing creative essays that could really stand out to universities. And I think the first 2 years at Hale that's something that I really focused on. I think the first draft of my personal statement, which was about Buddy Bear, sounded more like a business pitch than about my own story. So I think having that confidence to really showcase your unique narrative is something that universities are looking for, because once again, they're not solely taking you on the basis of being a good student. They're taking you on the basis of being a good person for their campus. And adding on to that, I think demonstrating how that narrative can continue to be further empowered at that particular university is something that the admissions officers are really looking for. And for Berkeley, I think the main thing was demonstrating that I could really be part of that wavelength that those 50 kids are on, being able to really thrive in that combination of engineering and business. Don't underestimate the amount of research that goes into the process, because they want to basically see that you've planned out what you're going to contribute at that campus. Like, they're looking for you to showcase that you know what clubs you want to join, you know what professors you want to work with, what research opportunities or internships you're interested in. Because if you go through the websites of these universities, there's millions of pieces of information that is waiting for you to draw from. So I think it's important to make sure that you know that this university is perfect for you, and that's something that you're able to effectively communicate to the admissions officers.
And also what quirky campus traditions you want to take part in, right? How do you have fun
as well,
right? There'll be some fountain hopping going on, I think at Stanford maybe later. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, how about over to you, Arya?
Right, and for me, I think probably the biggest thing I would have told myself is embrace the scatterbrain, embrace the ability to explore with the freedom. And even throughout the application process, I explored with a lot of freedom in my essays, 50-page documents eventually. But at the end of the day, also maybe focus a little bit more on getting that all concise and down into something meaningful, to something that truly represents you in a nice, concise way. And I think that that's something that I probably could have done better, and I think I recommend myself to do in the future, but still maintaining that scatter.
Amazing. Thank you. Kshitij?
I think I'd base my advice on the admissions note that my admissions officer wrote for myself. And that is that it doesn't matter what you do, but what matters is why you do it. It can be as small as helping one person learn something, but the intention that you have behind doing it and conveying this intention when you're applying is probably the most important. And that leads me to mentioning again, find your passion, follow your passion, because you cannot reverse engineer an application that's going to get you anywhere. You have to follow your passion, be authentic, be genuine, and just relax. It's going to work out for you. You're going to end up where you belong.
Very, very powerful message to close the panel discussion on. please help me in thanking the panelists. All amazing. Thank you for being so transparent and sharing your insight and your experiences. We'd love to open this up to Q&A to the audience. So if we can distribute some microphones, please feel free to address a question to an individual panelist or to several. Just raise your hand and Julia will come around and give you a microphone.
What would you do with your research documents after you make them, and what is like the most yeah?
I think I can take that one. So, sorry. Pioneer Academics, the program that I went to, I think they have one of the most renowned undergraduate research journals. So if you choose to go through them, they have a peer review process, and they have a very extensive process in which they pick research projects to go into their research journal, and it has an acceptance rate of something crazy like 2%. So that's an outlet that you can use to publish your research if you go through the program. And I'm sure there are other self-publishing routes. Maybe Kshitij, you can talk about that.
Yeah, personally, I'd just recommend going on the internet and looking for peer-reviewed journals for the subject that you've written your research in. And I'm sure you're going to find something that you where you can submit your research and have them publish it.
We also have a PhD on staff, Dr. Sam, who helps with research in terms of finding the right journals in which to publish. Please, when you ask a question, just introduce yourself, first name. If you're a student, let us know where you're studying. And yes, that would be great. We have another question over here.
All right, so my name is Iman. I'm at GEMS Metropole School, and I have two questions actually. So the first one is, what did you guys think about the essays? How did you guys go about writing them, and when did you start? And second, does anyone have like crazy awards like Olympiads or any of that stuff?
Okay, so I think I'll take that one. With essays, I think I was a bit late to the process. I joined Hale in senior year, I think maybe around May. But I think the first step is getting your personal statement down. That I think sets it for the rest of your essays, because with essays, the most important thing is self-discovery. And when you write your personal statement, I'm pretty sure it's the longest essay that you're going to write. It's 650 words, and you really have to delve deep into your experiences, find out which one tells your story the best, and also through the process, learn how to put that out on paper, how to present that to admissions officers. And I think for your supplemental essays, the best way to move forward is to think about what impact you've had in your through your extracurriculars and why you set out on doing them in the first place. For me, you asked about Olympiads, right? So I participated in Olympiads throughout high school, which I think helped me a lot, because as a CBSE student, it's CBSE isn't really, I think, recognized on the Common App, but I didn't take any APs. I just had my Olympiads starting from 9th grade. I took part in the SOF Olympiads held from Delhi. So that's a Science Olympiad Foundation, the International Olympiad Foundation, Space Tricks, IOSA. So I had a little bit of aerospace, general knowledge, math, science, all over the place. But I think even that is a wonderful way of learning instead of just boxing yourself in your curriculum. Yeah.
And adding on to the topic of Olympiads, so I participated in the IOF Olympiads, which provides qualification for the UAE national teams for the IMO Asian Math Olympiad, etc. And after participating in the Olympiads, I was able to gain qualification for the UAE national math team. But again, that isn't enough for the universities unless you frame it in a way that demonstrates how that contributed to your intellectual curiosity. For me, it was more so about demonstrating how the training camps for the national team provided me with the opportunity to learn university-level math material, and that extended my intellectual curiosity. So once again, I think the activity list only provides you with 150 characters, I believe, for any given activity. And that's not about describing the prestige of the activity per se, but more so about how that helped you develop as an individual. So I think making sure that even if it's an Olympiad or a team representation in some academic competition, make sure it demonstrates how it supported your growth as an individual.
And I think even on the UC app specifically, I think you get to explain your process of how you studied for that Olympiad, how you work towards it. So they also value that entire process and your experience when it comes to learning. Yeah.
And I also participated in the International Economics Olympiad where I won a bronze medal. But again, winning something, doing something that people would consider extraordinary is never going to be enough. You have to form a narrative around it. And in terms of essays that you also asked, just a general note. The Common App opens on the 2nd of August, I believe, wherein all the universities publish their prompts. So me personally, I would recommend that you start looking at supplements sometime around the beginning of August, by which time you should be done with your personal statement.
I also would like to the essay part of the question. Something that is so common knowledge, but people seem to forget it and also maybe skip it to save time, is to read others' essays and maybe other successful essays. And that's something that really helped me personally in this process. So whenever I'm struggling with brainstorming ideas for an essay or something, I would just use my Hale account to look at previous students' essays and how they utilized their space in this specific prompt to share something about themselves. I would read maybe 5, 6, 7 essays at times, and then ideas would just spark like that. So I think, read a lot of successful essays before you write yours.
It's a lot easier when you have reference points.
Definitely.
And I think, when it comes to writing the Common App personal statement, the prompts for this year will not change. They'll be the same as last year. But on average, each of you can speak to this, on average, it takes students 10 revisions, right, to get to the final product. You're all shaking your heads. That's what you should be planning on. It will make the difference. 75% of an admissions officer's time spent reviewing the application is on the writing. That is your opportunity to really tell your story in your own words. Excellent. Another question from the crowd. Who has got the microphone? Jackson. Oh, we have one. Here we go.
I'm Shravani from DPS Dubai. And my question is to Anaga. So, what particular advice would you give to CBSE students in particular?
All right. So, as a CBSE student, once you enter 11th grade, for me as a science student, there was the JEE entrance exams, right? So, you have everyone around you who's studying the same syllabus that you are, but at an advanced level. So, it's easy to get off track. It's easy to fall behind when you're on the side writing 40 to 50 essays and refining your extracurriculars, making sure your essays are right, staying ahead of deadlines. I think I don't even really have to mention this, but time management. It's an acquired skill. You can't develop it in a day. I think you learn from mistakes. You learn from successes. Time management is key. And I think with CBSE and board exams that come in 12th grade and 10th grade, a little bit of compromise might be necessary. You don't have to be the best at everything you do. You don't have to top your exams and be amazing at your extracurriculars. Obviously, that should be what you're aiming for, but I don't think that you need to be stuck up on things like that in a culture where, I know, it's very, very rigorous. Yeah.
Amazing question. Thank you. Next question.
Hi. My question. My name is Vedika. I go to GEMS Wellington International. So my question is, in your essays, you guys mentioned you also put your personal projects, what you've done, and with the academics. What would you say is the balance that you put? How much more did you focus on the academic side of things or personal side of things in the essay?
Right. So in my case in particular, I feel like the academic side and the personal side were somewhat interlinked, because I think you shouldn't really be talking about what you're doing in school for the most part. it should be what you do outside of your curriculum that should be the focus of most of your essays. In my case, that was my personal projects, and also just in general, there were a few essays that I wrote about my own self as well, and a few of my own experiences on a more personal level. But I'd say that overall, it shouldn't be too academic focused. You should focus on your extracurricular activities that relate to your major, for sure. But I'd say that in terms of purely academics, probably not that much at all.
I also feel like it depends on the prompt that you're answering, because obviously every university has a unique set of supplements that they want you to answer.
Also, at the end of the day, it's a personal statement. I think, take into account that they're going to see your academics, they're going to see your grades, but who are you as a person?
Right. They're asking you, all the prompts are asking you the same thing. Who are you? Not who do you want to be? Not what do you want to study? Not list your achievements for me, please, because I have that somewhere else. So some of them have nothing to do with academics, right? Great question. Thank you. Next question we have here on the side.
Is it on? Yeah. My name is Melika and I go to a German school in Sharjah. I have 2 questions. So what specific things should I consider if I, what college I should choose? And what should I do if my school doesn't have any extracurriculars?
Great question. Who wants to take that? Maybe Mohammed?
So I think I can relate a lot to your school doesn't have extracurriculars because, where I come from, it's not that common, the culture of extracurricular activities, extracurricular involvement, these stuffs. So I'd say go out and do your own thing. If you don't find the opportunities in the places that you would like to see them, create them. Make space for other people in your shoes to take let's say benefit from the things that you do. So it doesn't always have to be something that's personal or stuff, but you can. For me, I'm gonna tell you what I did, since that's my case. I did research on my own. I created an art club in my school. I painted on school walls also, because that was something that I wanted to do. I contacted officials and I did it. So really, if you look in opportunities that are already there, you're gonna limit yourself a lot. You can go out and do the things in the places that you feel like doing, basically.
So I think the highest form of leadership is not being president of a club, right? It's launching an initiative that impacts others. So it's an opportunity, and I think you heard some examples of how the panelists were able to pursue those opportunities themselves. There was a follow-up question on colleges. How do we know how to come up with that?
So I want to talk a little bit about, how do you know where you want to go? Like, that's so crazy. You have to pick where you're going to spend the next 4 years or more of your life. That's a lot of pressure. So I think list out what are the things that are most important to you. Is it academics? Is it location? Is it about the opportunities that you'll have? For me, what was really important is that I have access to a big city, but I want a campus. I know NYU says the city is your campus, but no, I want a literal campus. I wanted an actual campus. And that was one of the biggest, things that I look for. Also, it can be helpful to look at what program do you want to go to and what school offers that as the best program. And don't make the mistake of, and I know the irony in saying this, we all go to Ivies and T10 schools, but don't just look at the top schools. Look at the schools that genuinely interest you and genuinely you think you're going to fit in the best.
Amazing. Thank you. Next question. We got some in the back over there. Also, curriculum matters, size matters, right? Weather matters. All of these things are very important.
Some people would hate the core curriculum. Some people could not do it.
I think also campus size is important.
Mm-hmm. Not everyone is wired for Brown's open curriculum. Not everyone's wired. At Columbia, you have to read the classics, right? Not everyone wants to read the Iliad and the Odyssey. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Me too. So congratulations to all the panelists. It doesn't seem that 18-year-old are speaking to us, parents sitting here. Wonderful public speaking skills and wonderful ways in which you have showcased your journey of last 4 years. Thank you, and all the best for the future.
I have a small question. Am I audible? Yeah. All the panelists I see are applying and have gotten US universities. Was UK or Europe not a choice at all, or you applied and you prefer to go to the US? If so, then why? If that could be explained.
So I applied to both the US and the UK, and my final choices came down to Berkeley, Columbia, or Imperial in London. And once again, I think it just comes down to the matter of fit. For me, I never wanted to do a pure engineering degree. I always want to be someone who understands the technical aspect of creating a product, but at the same time is able to execute it and create impact with a business acumen. So that's something that I felt the US would be able to provide me with better, especially Berkeley MET, due to its focus on both the engineering and the business aspects. I think as someone who didn't necessarily want to pigeonhole myself into one particular area, although Imperial was offering a master's in engineering program, I felt that having that dual degree opportunity in both engineering and business was more attractive. I think it really depends what mindset you have for your academics to make that choice between US and UK. If you're certain that there is one field that you want to pursue, then I think the UK will provide you with a faster pathway for that particular field. But then if you are someone who wants to explore more diverse areas and is open to the possibility of exploring new areas and new classes that you might have previously not thought would appeal to you, I think the US offers a greater degree of flexibility.
I think I completely agree with Arnav, where I applied to both the US and the UK as well, and my final choices came down to Stanford, Duke, and UCL. And I, of course, chose Stanford because of the fact that I had the freedom to, for example, in the future, do a dual degree in computer science or economics, or completely change to data science. But it's just the freedom that comes with studying in the US that prompted me to choose to go to Stanford.
Great question. Thank you. We have some more questions from the crowd.
Hi, my name is Ankita. Again, great oratory skills. So, how an Ivy League can help you meet your aspirations? Because not everybody will be, it's not, everybody can aspire for Ivy League, but there are other colleges that they would. So how particularly an Ivy League can help you meet those aspirations?
Shall we define what the Ivy League is first?
Yeah. I think so. That will be very helpful because we are talking only a bit of Ivy League, but there are so many other colleges out there.
Correct.
So, how to differentiate and what are we looking at?
So I'll just give some context as to what the Ivy League is, right? It's nothing more than an athletics conference comprised of 8 universities, which was originally founded for intercollegiate athletes to compete against each other in rowing. That's it. It's an athletics conference. MIT, Caltech, Duke, Johns Hopkins, Chicago, Berkeley are not Ivy League schools. But we use this term as all-encompassing to refer to the best universities in America. But maybe we can just take that question and tweak it just a little bit. How can a top U.S. university empower you to reach your goals? What makes it unique?
I think, and I think also Arjan would agree with me, the thing that attracts me the most about Brown University and maybe also the other Ivies is the people that are going to go there. So this sort of elitism that can sound like a bit, not as good, can also serve in creating a space for aspiring individuals who have big ambitions and, good work ethics and bigger dreams even, to meet with each other and work within the same environment for, the time of the 4 years. And I think that's what's most important to me, because networking in an Ivy seems like something that would really spark me on that journey after college.
And I want to say, I don't know if you're necessarily paying for the education as much as you're paying for the networking and the connections. I'm doing the same program that Barack Obama did. Like, that's, crazy to think of, because I think what these elite institutions opens you up for is they open doors. They open opportunities. You know, the education might be parallel at Columbia than any of the top 20 schools. But what differentiates the Ivy Leagues or the very top universities are the doors they open and the people that you get to meet.
You'll read the same textbooks everywhere. Maybe at Columbia, the professor wrote the textbook, right? But at the end of the day, I also think that just by virtue of going to a great university, it's just a starting point. You have to excel there as well. Some students think that, oh, okay, I'm at Harvard, I'm good. But if you don't work hard, if you don't distinguish yourself, you're going to reach a ceiling of achievement. Right? It's just a set of opportunities, and the opportunities at these universities just happen to be greater than they are anywhere else.
I'd just like to add something that a teacher at school told me once I got my Stanford acceptance. What sets apart a lot of these top universities is that, like the panelists mentioned, you're going to a place where almost everyone around you shares the same drive for their passions. Everyone's motivated the same way you are, and that in turn motivates you to be the best version of yourself. And I think that's really important, the people that you surround yourself with.
Absolutely. Any other insight, Aaron? You've been quiet.
Yeah, I think that every school has it in a different way because you're with all these people who are united by a shared sort of passion, and each of these schools have their own way of doing that. Like, for example, at Columbia, they're united through the core curriculum, which ties everything together. And at Brown, meanwhile, it's the exact opposite. There's the open curriculum that encourages everyone to explore on their own in a supportive environment. And I feel like at the end of the day, it's the fact that you've concentrated such a high amount of individuals with such similar goals and a drive for success that you can find yourself brought up by all the other people around you. Everyone around you will bring you up and encourage you to do better, to make a difference in the world as a whole. And you hear all about all these startups coming out from Berkeley, all the startups coming out from Stanford in particular. And the biggest reason for this is the people there, their drives for being united by a shared goal and working towards the goal together in a setting that is perfectly conducive to all of this.
Extremely well said. Thank you. Other questions from the crowd? Guys, we have some questions in the front as well, if we can come up.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Myself, Anjali, just a confused and curious parent over here. Congratulations to all the panelists. My question is there a particular SAT score that you settled at in order to ensure that you got such elite admits?
So, SATs, I thought they were optional. No? Did you guys take the SATs? And if so, how did you prepare? How well did you do? Did you think it was important?
So I applied to all my schools for computer science, and as a STEM major, I think the universities definitely do look at your SAT math score at least. I had a 1550 on my SAT. That was a 750 in the reading and writing section and an 800 in math. So the SAT, in my opinion, is not a test that necessarily just tests a lot of knowledge that you've acquired over the years, but rather your reasoning, your aptitude, and how you decide to apply that knowledge during the exam and how you manage your time during the exam. I took my first, I had my first attempt towards the end of junior year because I just wanted to take the last pen and paper test. So I had maybe a month or so where I did get test prep from a center, but that was mostly mock tests. So like I said, practice is the only way in which you can really improve your score because it is an application-based exam. For me, I think the Indian curriculum prepared me pretty well for the math section. I didn't have to put too much extra effort for that, but I did spend a lot of time finding tips and tricks to improve my reading and writing.
Great.
And I had, sorry, I forgot, but for the digital exam, I think the Blue Book tests worked really well. Yeah, I think there were 4 when I took it, but there's more being added now. So just keep doing those, and you'll see your score improve eventually.
Great.
I wanted to add that if you are taking like a course that's not recognized for these admissions officer, I think it's safer to take the SAT just in case they're not well informed about the curriculum that you're taking, and not sure about like how much your grades on your GPA in that certain curriculum can say about your academic level. So that was for me about the Syrian baccalaureate. I was not sure how much these admissions officers in the US know about what we learn. So I took the SAT. I didn't get like a super score. I got a 1490, which I think was enough to show them that the way that I was studying in school really prepared me for their academic environment.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly add that I think that the SAT just gets your foot in the door. And from there, your extracurriculars carries you through the door. So I was very, dead set on I want a 1500 because that was what would get my foot in the door to the schools that I was applying to. And I took the SAT 4 grueling times, and I struggled with the SAT, but I got that 1500 in the end, and that's where I stopped. I did not aim for higher because, like I said, just your foot in the door. And, I just think that was what was enough for me. And, I was also running out of time, just side note. But Megan, my counselor, told me that it's better to submit your SAT score because even if you think like a 1450 is bad, these admissions counselors, if you don't submit it, might think that it was a lot worse than what you think is not up to your standard. So it's always on the safer side to submit yours.
So who applied test optional? Raise your hands. Right? So out of all of our dozens of high achievers since the test optional policy was introduced a few years ago, I can think of only one example of a student who got into an Ivy League or top 10 school who applied test optional. She got into Cornell. Since these students applied in November and January, many universities have reintroduced the requirement for the submission of standardized tests. It's required at Cornell. It's required at Harvard, right? It's required at MIT. So every week there are new universities reintroducing the requirement, Georgia Tech, Georgetown. So every student should plan on preparing for taking one of these exams, the other exam being ACT. Figure out which one is right for you, and then make sure you do well, because that is the one of the only transparent parts of the application process. Every university will publish the average SAT, ACT score of accepted students every year, as well as the 25th to 75th percentile. So please, it's important. So please prepare accordingly. We have time for one more question before we break out into the small group sessions. And who has got a microphone?
Hi.
Yes,
my
hi.
name's Ayan. I study at Dubai Scholars. How do you think summer programs play a role in getting accepted? Because I just got accepted into the UC Berkeley summer program, and I just want to ask that.
So who did a summer program here? Raise your hands. Okay, great. Did it play a role in your opinion?
I think it did, but I think the role that it played was it allowed me to get college credits and learn at a college level before I actually went to college. And it, displayed that intellectual curiosity that we all talked about. And I think it's important that you're following you're following the path to a summer program because you want to learn and not because you think it'll look good on your application. Although it might look good, they want to see that you're learning at a college level. And, an added bonus is that when you get those credits, you can skip some classes when you get to college.
And again, with everything, getting into the summer program probably isn't enough. It's about what you make out of that opportunity. I think something that Peter's always said is that universities are looking at what you've done in terms of the context around you. So being able to understand what opportunities you had and to what extent you made use of those opportunities. So, for example, I did the Yale Innovations in Technology summer program, and I don't think doing the summer program was enough. After the program, I was able to get in touch with my team, and we continued working on the idea that we presented for our capstone, and we were able to present it to early-stage investors. So I think getting into the summer program is a massive accomplishment, but then what's going to, again, elevate it to the next step is being able to get an opportunity from that program that you can then extend towards actually adding some value into your application. I think, for example, being able to get in touch with a professor, being able to access a further research opportunity, an internship, anything that you think would allow you to reach that next stage.
Amazing. So you will have still more opportunity to ask questions to the panelists in the breakout sessions. Please join me once again in thanking our amazing panelists. Thank you, Kshitij, Aryan, Arnav, Wian, Mohammed, and Annika. Thank you. And now, Julia, you will direct us to the right place.
Hello, everyone. Again, thank you. We'd like to invite you for a little coffee break and some refreshments just outside. We'll break for about 20-25 minutes, which will give us enough time to just sort of rearrange the room and connect with the students. We will have 8 breakout rooms and breakout sessions. To build off some of the questions that were asked, we have a specific breakout corner for summer programs, in fact. We have students that will be attending universities in the UK, Canada, and Europe, so you're welcome to speak to those students as well. And then, of course, we have our student panelists, which will be available to answer any questions you might have about computer science, architecture, political science, and then management, economics, technology, and econ as well. Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
I'm also available to answer any questions for the next 20 minutes here if you'd like to come up front. Thank you.